The talk today will be entitled Yoga, Meditation, and the Brain. And I'd like to start with the point that you started the meditation with, and that is our understanding of yoga from Maharishi. Maharishi Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutra, defined yoga as yogas chitta vritti nirodha. And this verb, nirodha, can be translated in many different ways. It can be translated as control. If this is the case, and then yoga is control of the fluctuations of the mind. This is suggesting yoga is experienced after much effort, much control. It suggests the Yoga Sutra is a book of things to do to attain the state of yoga. And as you said so very clearly, Ankit, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi translates Nirodha as complete settling. Yoga is the complete settling of the fluctuations of the mind. Notice this one change in translation changes yoga from being something you have to do to yoga being a state of being. Yoga is the complete settling of the fluctuations of the mind. And then the whole Yoga Sutra, rather than being a how-to book, becomes a description of this state of yoga. With that in mind, let's ask, how readily do different meditation techniques lead to the experience of the state of yoga? Meditation techniques have one thing in common, and that they explore the structure of conscious experience. And what is the structure of conscious experience? It involves an object. That is, it involves something that we can see or hear or touch or taste or report. In this case, it's some flowers. It involves a subject. That's us. That's the knower. That's the experiencer. And then the process, which is linking the knower to the object. And what we'll find is some meditations emphasize the object, others the process, others the subject. I'm going to give you short descriptions. I want you to read them, and we'll see how each description is fundamentally different. Here's the first one. I'll let you read it. Notice this description is talking about focusing, sharp point of focus. And notice what is in the sharp point of focus. What is in the sharp point of focus is the abdomen. Is the abdomen moving in and out? This is a description of Vipassana meditation. Breath focus. And notice there's no sense of self here. No sense of the rest of my body or the environment. Just the physical movement of the breath in and out. Vipassana, it probes the object. It wants to experience the isness, the essence of the object, without the mental chatter describing it. Now, Vipassana and other meditations that engage in focus are in a category of meditations called focused attention. And focused attention meditation are any meditations which probe the object. Any meditations whose purpose is to completely engage in the object. And when you're doing this type of mental activity, your brainwave is very fast. It's called gamma. It goes up and down 20 to 50 times per second. Your attention is completely identified with the object. Other meditations that report this gamma EEG is Zen meditation. This is where the attention, this research, the people were asked to put their attention in the center of the brain. Also, compassion meditation, in which what you're doing is you're trying to get a single experience that is a pure experience of compassion. And while the content is different, the process is the same and the brainwaves are the same. Here's a second description. I'll let you read it. Notice in this experience, there's not just one content, like before with Vipassana, the diaphragm moving in and out, but there's a whole flood of experiences. And what the person is doing is they're attending to each experience, letting it go. You notice there is a sense of I, but how do they describe I? Notice at the very end. I find I'm reprocessing who I am. And what they're doing is reprocessing their memories. This is a description during mindfulness meditation. And I suggest mindfulness meditation is probing the link between the knower and the known. The attention is no longer completely focused on an object. It's more expanded. It's that larger awareness of experiences passing through my awareness, but it's still completely involved in this process. Now, these meditations, including mindfulness practices, are in a category called open monitoring. In the open monitoring, what you're doing is you're just watching, observing in a non-judgmental way, moment by moment experience. And the brainwave you see when you do this is a different character. It goes up, it's called theta. It goes up 4 to 8 times per second. It's seen in the front of the brain. In the back of the brain, you see alpha 2. This theta frequency has to do with following internal mental attention. It has to do with keeping attention on what's going, what's changing inside the brain. The alpha activity in the back of the brain is following the fact that the senses are silent, are quiet. The back part of the brain is your sensory part of the brain. In this category is mindfulness, but also zazen, non-directed meditation, saharaj yoga. So these are two major categories, and we see these categories are keeping us in thinking. The state of yoga is not a direct part of these meditation processes. Let us look at this third experience. Notice this is talking about thoughts becoming secondary, silence becoming primary. The core content is increasing silence. In this description, they also use the word I. Notice how I described I. It's the very end. I am completely whole and at peace. Now, I hope this one was very familiar to you. This was our transcendental meditation practice. And notice that in this experience, the self, wholeness of the self, is what's growing. And this is probing the subject. Now, the subject in that case isn't the active thinking, experiencing person, as in open monitoring or focused attention meditations. It's the core, the essential nature of the knower as awareness, consciousness, lively silence. This is in the third category called automatic self-transcending. Meditations in this category start with thinking and end up with being, pure consciousness. And the brain patterns are unique, and they're unique because it's a completely different process going on, just as we saw in the descriptions. And what we see here is in the front of the brain, we see a frequency called alpha 1. It's alpha 1 because it's the lower part of the alpha band, 8 to 10 cycles per second. And this is seen when the attention is turned within and we're just awake. This is what we see in our transcendental meditation practice. This is the experience of the state of yoga, complete settling of the activity of the mind. What is happening in the brain during this experience? So here's the brain, it's looking to the right. The center is called the thalamus. It's the switchboard of experience. And what we see and hear and touch and taste comes into the thalamus, and the thalamus sends output to the surface of the brain, the cortex. The cortex sends output back, you get a loop. This neural loop is a neural representation of outside content. Now there's a second circuit that goes through the thalamus, and that's bringing wakefulness from the brainstem. The thalamus also makes contact with the cortex, but what this neural loop is maintaining is wakefulness itself, awareness, not some specific thing we can report, but just a level of wakefulness. Now, if you're doing Vipassana or mindfulness, what you're doing is you're focusing on these blue loops. You're focusing on content. That's where your attention is. With our transcendental meditation practice, we begin the mantra. The mantra becomes secondary. It's no longer completely gripping awareness. And what's becoming more primary is inner silence. What is happening is content is decreasing while wakefulness is being maintained. And that state of complete inner silence is being supported by these wakefulness loops. Now there's important information. It takes 1/10 of a second for a loop to go to the cortex and come back. So that means it's going to go up 10 times per second. And that's why we see a 10 times per second wave during TM. Also notice that all the activity on the surface is being coordinated from the center. So the electrical activity is connected, is coordinated. In science, it's called coherence. Coherence is just that the rising and falling of the waves are connected. We can see brain waves during TM, during the state of yoga. And these are coherence maps. Top row is top of the brain, bottom row is front of the brain. Each dot is a sensor. Each column is a different frequency band. If this person was practicing Vipassana, they'd be high levels of gamma coherence. We see in our TM, gamma coherence is very low because it's not a technique which involves control. We see the primary levels of high coherence are seen in alpha 1, this frequency of just wakefulness itself. And what coherence means is those parts of the brain are working together. They're working together in whatever the task is. And we see in this non-task task of transcending, the whole brain, especially the front of the brain, is intimately connected with itself. It's as though the whole brain, this front of the brain is executive center. The whole executive center is awake to itself. Now, important point about our TM practice is we master it quickly. This top row is the coherence maps of someone who's been practicing TM for 6 months. Bottom row is someone who's been practicing TM for 24 years. What we find is the coherence during transcendental meditation is very similar. And indeed, mathematically, it's not significantly different. Mathematically, if I look at someone who's been practicing TM for a few years, 7 years, 24 years, I cannot distinguish the different categories by their TM EEG. The difference comes in activity. Here it's the same two people, and now their eyes are open. They're doing a computer task, watching the computer, responding. Which is a long-term meditator, do you think? Top one or bottom one? Many of you are probably thinking, well, it must be the top one. Look at this coherence in the alpha 1 frequency when their eyes are open. This is what happens when Maharishi said yoga practice involved that state of yoga, even momentarily. And continual yoga practice brings a state of yoga into activity until the state of yoga becomes our constant companion. It's always there, underlying thinking and acting and behavior. It's giving an unchanging fundamental basis to life. Now, if any of you are students and are 20 or 21 years of age, this slide may not be very meaningful. I mean, do you have to wait 24 years before something can happen? No. This is looking at what's happening over 12 months. At Maharishi International University, all students practice Transcendental Meditation as part of our curriculum. A third come to MIU have not yet learned Transcendental Meditation, so I invited them into the Brain Center, recorded their brain waves. What we have, the purple dot, is what is the coherence during eyes closed rest. The green dot is what's the coherence during eyes open tasks. And then they're trained in TM in their first course. They came back into the lab 2 months later. Now, the purple dot here is coherence during TM practice, and it's known to be higher during eyes closed, so I expected that. But look here. After just 2 months practice, there's already the beginning of that brain pattern of the transcendent, that brain pattern of yoga is beginning to become part of their daily activity. Here it's 6 months and 12 months. We see that the levels of coherence during TM are the same high levels, but coherence continues to grow in activity. This is growth of higher states of consciousness. This is growth of enlightenment. Notice it starts from the very beginning, from your very first experience of this state of yoga when you learn TM. And then through regular practice, becoming more and more familiar with inner unboundedness, it becomes very naturally part. It's like a flower growing up, opening up. This next research is looking at what are brainwave patterns of someone reporting the experience of enlightenment. This was cosmic consciousness, Turiyatit Chaitanya. 17 people reporting that experience. 17 people reporting TM practice, but not reporting higher states, and 17 non-meditating individuals. Here we have the beige box is our amplifier. We have a cap here to record the brain waves, or looking at a computer for the task. And what distinguished these three groups was higher coherence in the front part of the brain. Again, the front part of the brain is the executive centers of what controls thinking and feeling, sense of self, more reasoning, the bigger picture. And it was coherence across many frequency bands, because you need to have coherence in alpha to support that inner state of being, coherence in beta, gamma for thinking and action. Also, there was more alpha amplitude overall. Alpha amplitude is a signature of inner wakefulness, inner orientation. Gamma is what we see when the attention is lost outside. The people seem to be experiencing life from a different platform, that of inner silence. And the brain preparatory response. They were given a simple reaction time task where the response was the same, and they were giving a choice reaction time task where they had to make a decision. Notice in the simple reaction time task, the people reporting higher states, the brain began to respond more before the task. Why? Because they knew what they had to do, so they could motivate bodily systems, perceptual systems, motor systems, etc. Where it was a choice task, we see that they remain balanced. And once they had enough information, and then the brain actually started to respond. Maharishi says that in enlightenment, the thought comes to mind at the right time. When you need something, it's there. What we see in this research is the brain starts to become active at the right time. That you're at the balance point, you're at the state of yoga, evenness, until it's time to act. And then there's a very straight, uninterrupted outward flow. We added these together, and this is how the three groups are differentiated by these three values. This is a so-called brain integration scale. And we use this to look at what changes over short-term TM practice. Here we have college students, pre-test, we recorded their brain waves, again during tasks, and then those in the purple column, or this blue column, were trained in TM. Those in the plum-colored column were delayed start. They had to wait to the end of the study. 3 months later, we looked at brain integration again. Again, this is during tasks. And what we see is with just 3 months TM practice already, the brain is beginning to integrate more of evenness, wholeness in activity. We looked at teachers. These were in teachers and also administrators. These are secondary school teachers. They had higher brain integration. Also, we look at psychological measures. They had decreased depression, decreased perceived stress, decreased teacher burnout. The state of yoga has a very practical, concrete benefit. It gives a new basis to experience the world. Thank you for your attention.